June 4, 1943. Norfolk Naval Base, Virginia. Underoffizier Herman Butcher gripped the ship's railing as he descended the gangplank, legs unsteady after 14 days crossing the Atlantic. Through the morning haze, he saw something that contradicted 3 years of Nazi propaganda. American dock workers, white and Negro, operating side by side with cranes and machinery that seemed from another century. Women in coveralls ran hoists, children sold newspapers at the gates, and nobody fled at the sight of enemy uniforms. "Die Spin and die American Americana," Butcher whispered to the man behind him. "The Americans are crazy." He would later write in his memoir, Behind Barbed Wire and published in Germany in 1952, that it was one of the most detailed accounts of life in America. The Norfolk base sprawled across 4,300 acres, its docks stretching beyond sight, cranes loading and unloading dozens of ships simultaneously. One morning, this single port handled more tonnage than Hamburg did in a week. But it wasn't the scale that stunned the prisoners. It was the normalcy. Civilians wandered freely near military installations. Vendors sold coffee and donuts within sight of warships, and a brass band played popular music at a nearby war bond rally. 2,500 veterans of the RML Africa Corps stood in formation on American soil, the first major contingent of what would become 425,000 German prisoners held in the United States by war's end. What they witnessed over the coming months wouldn't just be American abundance. They would encounter a nation at war that refused to act like it, a society so secure it treated mortal enemies like errant house guests, and a people whose strange customs would prove more destructive to Nazi ideology than any battlefield defeat. Processing at Norfolk began with what Butcher described in his memoir as the first impossibility. German doctrine held prisoners as assets to exploit or burdens to minimize. The Geneva Convention applied when convenient. Yet here, American officers read the Geneva rules in fluent German, explained rights, asked about dietary needs. Jewish American personnel, including sergeants with clearly Jewish surnames, handed Red Cross packages and explained kosher meals were available. Several Wehrmacht soldiers laughed nervously, thinking it mockery. It wasn't. American military prepared for religious dietary requirements. Medical inspections defied military logic. Wounded prisoners received the same penicillin barely available to German field hospitals. Swiss Inspector Guy Matroy noted, "Medical treatment provided to German PWs equals or exceeds that given to American personnel." African-American medical personnel served in integrated units, drawing blood from Wehrmacht officers, a practice forbidden by German law. The most incomprehensible sight came at the first meal. German prisoners entered a mess hall where American sailors were eating, enemies separated by 50 feet, sharing the same food lines and meals. Americans focused on a baseball game broadcast, not their enemies. The 3-day train journey to interior camps added another layer of dissonance. Trains were passenger coaches with cushioned seats, stopping at stations where civilians observed freely. At Union Station in Washington, D.C., German prisoners saw American families waving goodbye, children holding flags, teenagers sharing milkshakes, all while guards managed traffic more than the prisoners. Trains passed industrial areas in plain sight. The Glenn L. Martin aircraft plant in Baltimore showed parking lots full of personal cars. B-26 bombers lined for delivery. No attempt at concealment. Factories ran visibly, workers' housing and gardens spread for miles. At a Harrisburg station, prisoners watched men carry lunchboxes, throwing away half-eaten fruit and opening fresh ones. A casual abundance that stunned soldiers trained to survive scarcity. Camp Hearn, Texas, opened December 1942 on 720 acres near the town of Hearn. Military records showed capacity for 4,800 German prisoners in conditions exceeding civilian experience. Wooden barracks with electricity, indoor plumbing, hot water, individual beds with sheets and blankets replaced straw pallets. Recreation halls offered ping-pong tables, musical instruments, libraries. Swiss inspector Emil Sandstorm wrote, "Conditions at Camp Hearn exceed Geneva Convention requirements and surpass living conditions many knew in Germany." Lieutenant Colonel Cecile Stiles addressed arriving prisoners in German, explaining rules, but also allowing largely self-governance. Prisoners elected spokesmen, organized activities, and managed schedules within military requirements, a concept unimaginable in the Wehrmacht. The camp hospital included surgical suites, X-ray machines, and penicillin. Prisoner Georg Gartner received appendicitis surgery within hours. The camp canteen allowed prisoners to purchase goods with script earned from voluntary labor: cigarettes, chocolate, soap, writing materials, musical instruments, art supplies. The War Department intended these small comforts to maintain morale and reduce escape attempts. The idea that enemy soldiers could shop for goods beyond mere survival was an affront to German military logic. By September 1943, labor shortages led to prisoner employment across Texas. The War Manpower Commission authorized work in agriculture and non-military industries. Prisoners earned 80 cents per day, equal to American privates. At King Ranch, near Kingsville, prisoners worked alongside Mexican-American and Negro laborers on 825,000 acres, larger than Rhode Island. Mechanization stunned them. Combines replaced dozens of workers, trucks moved crops, aircraft surveyed herds. Ranch foremen treated prisoners as temporary employees rather than enemies. At cotton gins, prisoners saw processing speeds impossible in Europe. Yet workers took regular breaks, ate full lunches, listened to radios, and productivity thrived. American farmers openly criticized Roosevelt, argued with inspectors, and faced no consequences, a defiance that would mean death in Nazi Germany. Local newspapers documented prisoner interactions with civilians, supervised Christmas shopping, teenage culture at soda fountains, jazz and swing music, fashionable young people undeterred by war. Women's behavior especially shocked prisoners, driving trucks, running businesses, supervising mail workers, flying aircraft in the WASP program, all visible from prisoner work sites. Churches invited prisoners to services. Christmas concerts performed in German by local choirs, guided by mothers with sons fighting overseas. The cognitive dissonance broke several prisoners emotionally. Christmas 1943 at Camp Hearn included gifts collected by churches, schools, veteran groups, and civic organizations. The camp Christmas tree stood 30 feet tall, decorated with electric lights, consuming more electricity than most German villages had for all purposes. The feast menu totaled 5,000 calories per man, including roast turkey, ham, candied sweet potatoes, green beans, stuffing, pies, ice cream, and even wine for officers, while German civilians received 1,200 calories daily. Racial dynamics challenged Nazi ideology. Black soldiers served as guards, prisoners requested transfers denied by administration, and segregation paradoxes allowed prisoners more freedom than some Americans. German prisoners saw productive mixed-race crews on farms and industrial sites, undermining assumptions of racial superiority. 3 cases exemplify transformation. Hermann Butcher arrived convinced of Nazi ideals but saw Christmas generosity in 1943 and recognized the strength of victors' confidence. He later emigrated and became an engineer for General Motors. Georg Gartner escaped from Camp Deming in 1945, lived under an assumed name, married an American, and surrendered in 1985. Reinhold Pell left Camp Washington out of curiosity, lived illegally, worked, married an American, surrendered voluntarily. Across over 500 camps, patterns emerged: agricultural training in Oklahoma, art programs in Kansas, Arctic grade provisions in Colorado, exposure to American newspapers and radio, democratic debate, and freedom of thought. International Red Cross inspections rated camps above Geneva Convention standards. Inspector Guy Metro wrote in August 1944 that food, medical care, educational and recreational opportunities exceeded treaty requirements. Prisoners at factories observed mechanization and efficiency, productivity driven by morale, company pride, and competition. Rail yards coordinated operations with precision, logistics visible, organized, and effective. As Germany collapsed in spring 1945, Americans prepared prisoners for return, with vocational, agricultural, technical, and administrative training. Special projects divisions identified potential democratic leaders, providing additional instruction. Of 425,000 prisoners, escape attempts numbered only 2,022. With minimal successful long-term escapes, voluntary labor participation exceeded 87%. Post-war surveys revealed 74% held favorable views of American democracy, 61% supported the Marshall Plan, 55% advocated German-American alliance, 38% desired immigration, 23% maintained correspondence with American families. 5,000 legally immigrated, 92% naturalized promptly, achieving success above general immigrant populations. Returned prisoners influenced West German Reconstruction. Bundestag members, mayors, agricultural modernization experts, teachers, and business managers applied American methods. Hans-Georg von Studnitz told historians in 1965, "We returned with knowledge of democracy, free markets, and cooperation. We had seen the future and knew it worked." Camp Hearn closed in December 1945, but connections endured. Annual correspondence continued until 2001. The 40th anniversary of D-Day in 1984 saw former prisoners return to Texas, embracing former guards, laying flowers at memorials, reflecting transformation from enemies to friends. Historians document the process extensively. Arnold Kramer, Judith Gansberg, Antonio Thompson, Ron Robbins, among others, confirming the ideological and practical transformation of German prisoners through exposure to American society, rather than coercion. The German prisoners who reached America between 1943 and 1946 witnessed what seemed impossible. Every casual freedom, small kindness, puzzling generosity accumulated into ideological transformation. They expected a weak nation, and instead found a society confident enough to show mercy. Transformation came through reality, not propaganda. Observing democracy in action, racial integration advancing despite segregation, women exercising authority, enemies becoming friends through simple humanity. Unusual sights to German eyes, mundane to Americans, achieved what military defeat could not. Complete ideological transformation. German prisoners didn't just witness American power. They experienced American values. They didn't just observe democracy. They participated in it. America's greatest victory lay not in battles, but in camps where enemies became advocates, through witnessing reality, through human kindness. Those unusual sights changed individuals and nations, sowing seeds for the Atlantic Alliance, the Marshall Plan, and the democratic reconstruction of Europe.